Correct. You're professional.
I mean, that's what you're shooting for. You know what I mean? The trouble is you're worried that the reality is going to be too evident. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 56 of the Adam Makes Beer Industry Pro podcast. Today, I'm excited to be chatting with Shanleigh Thomsen. Before we get rolling, let me give a shout out to our fantastic sponsors that make content like this possible. Starting a brewery is a big step. Blickman Engineering is here to help. Since 2006, they've equipped hundreds of nanobreweries for success. Their new 3.5 barrel Pro Surface electric brewing system cuts maintenance and saves at least 30 minutes per day with powerful under kettle heating. From 1 to 15 barrel brew houses to keg washers and grain mills, Blickman has what you need. Ready to go pro? Contact Phil or Tom at proseries@blickmanengineering.com. Blickman Engineering is a proud sponsor of this channel and loves to help brewers at every stage of their journey. Tracking and managing the financial health of your brewery is a primary pillar of success. Check out my boy David Lentz at Brewed Fiscally. This man has the industry experience and skills you need so you can focus on growing your business. Bookkeeping, fractional CFO support, financial management system design, business plan review, hit up your boy. Check him out at brewedfiscally.com or shoot him an email at david@brewedfiscally.com. He's good people. That's my favorite live read, just so you know. It's also the one that I wrote. That, well, air quotes wrote. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, no shade at the Blickman ad. But ladies and gentlemen, Shanleigh Thomsen is a fermentation scientist and industry strategist with a decade of experience spanning brewing, hops, and product formulation. She's worked across every tier of the alcohol supply chain, from global beverage companies to regional farms. Shan holds a master's in food science and is currently pursuing her MBA at UC Davis, where she focuses on market strategy and ingredient innovation in the alcohol industry. Through her platform, Shan Ferments and Breaking Brews, she shares insights on hops, sensory science, and the evolving landscape of fermentation. Shan, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. Just before we went live, we started discussing CBC. We didn't actually connect at CBC, even though I think I did see you from afar at the football stadium at one point. But yeah, there's a lot of folks, a lot of things going on. This was the first time I went to a conference representing myself, the first time not attached to another company. And it's the same for you. How was your CBC?
Yeah, no, we as we discussed, it was a whirlwind. Definitely took a year off my life, which, you know, as most CBCs tend to do for me. But yeah, definitely a new experience going in, not necessarily representing a larger company or a company in general, and just being able to kind of float around and be who I am naturally, which for better or for worse. But yeah, I got to go to I think I made it to almost every supplier event.
Okay, nice.
I think, yeah, no, I was everywhere because it was easy. It's Indianapolis, it's small. The Ubers are so cheap there. I don't know. I might as well get in a $3 Uber halfway across. Why not?
It's that they're paying you to go somewhere at this point. That's
yes, exactly. No,
yeah.
I mean, I'm going to get more out of the food and beers that they're going to be giving me. That was also my downfall. There was a lot of, not drinking beer and more moving to the margaritas that were at Sun King. And the hospitality of said employees at Sun King who lets my downfall. But yeah, wonderful CBC, always a blast. I'm excited for next year. Philly next year, really pumped about. It's the 250th anniversary of the country. They pulled some strings. We're going to have some fun there. So yeah, it's going to be a good time. Have you been to Indianapolis before? Yes. So I went to Purdue for my master's. So Indianapolis was our backyard when we really wanted to get out of town, our little college town up in West Lafayette. we'd take a day trip and then cram as many people as we could into a $90 hotel, being college students, you know. And yeah, it's interesting because Sun King was essentially the only thing around for a brewery. So back then, you know, we really didn't have many options as far as beer goes in Indianapolis, but we sure had a lot of other options.
Sure.
There's a lot of Fireball drank. I do remember that. Yeah.
Well, it was the first time in Indianapolis for me really staying for a few days, and it's nice. It's walkable. It's you know, it's not too big. I'm a little bit of a small town guy, so it was easy to get around, and the Ubers were cheap. And I'll say this for anybody out there that knows me and have done conferences with me before, I am an expert at avoiding ever having to call an Uber, because I don't feel like I can do it correctly. Because the one time I did it, this dude picked me up and dropped me somewhere in the city, which was not the brewery I wanted to go. And I said, hey man, I don't think this is the spot. And he said, get out here. So I feel like, I mean, I felt like I was a decent, I just got in, didn't say anything. And anyways, so I broke my streak as like an Uber bummer.
Yes.
And I actually called some Ubers myself.
Wow.
Did a lot of walk in. It worked well. It worked well. It was a good time.
Yeah, this is
a good time.
I mean, it was great. And this is the first time I stayed near the convention center. Usually I'm a good 20-30 minute walk away. I can't afford anything around it. So I actually got less steps than I usually do in, because I just rolled out of bed and walked right over. So, and it was smaller as far as like the number of, well, maybe not the number of suppliers, but definitely the area of the expo itself. I, of course, never made it to a seminar as per usual. It's tradition. If I started now, you know.
Yeah, I mean, at this point.
Right? No, I mean, it was great, but I still have quite a bit to do on catch up. It was exhausting because I went from there to the Kentucky Derby right after. So, yeah, my body is still recovering from everything.
For sure.
And it's the Firestone Walker Invitational next week. So that's,
nice.
Yeah, very exciting. Summer is the busiest time of the year, I feel, even though I say that in February and March and April.
Have you done the Firestone Invitational before?
I did it last year for the first time, and honestly, they put on just one of the coolest events ever, I would say. You know, the beer is incredible, the people are incredible, and I use it kind of as a litmus test for that's not the right word, canary in the mine. There we are, one of those metaphors. For the industry, because you know it sold out in like 5 minutes. I believe like less than 5 minutes. I don't know the exact timing, but I know there were people that came in, you know, and they were in the wait list on the website. And to me, you know, we can talk all about the fact that Gen Z is not drinking anymore. There's a downfall in overall consumption of alcohol and beer. But I also think that there's a lot of people still drinking and a lot of people searching out really good craft, because events like that and experiential events are still selling out time and time and time again. Festivals are still maybe not as busy, but definitely quite busy. And those large events like Festival of the Dark Arts here in Astoria on the West Coast for Fort George, sold out, completely sold out. There was no way you're getting tickets. Things are still happening in this industry that are indicating to me that people are drinking and that there is a healthy need and market for beer.
Sure. So it's interesting for me that, so I came up, when I first started learning how to brew, I came up listening to the Brewing Network podcast, and they often had folks from Firestone on there. And so it's one of those funny situations. I think I've met Matt Brendelson like a time or two, just like, oh, hey, nice to meet you kind of things. But it's one of those experiences where you listen to people talk enough that you feel like you get to know them and their beer, even though you've only had their beer on rare occasion. Right, and so when you mentioned the Firestone Walker Festival, I don't know, it got me going. It feels nostalgic, even though like I've never actually been to that. What do you think that it is that they do well with that festival?
I think bringing in and rotating out type breweries, they, to my understanding, are as a collective, as a group of brewers picking the breweries that they believe, along with the marketing team, obviously, but bringing in new breweries every year, swapping them out. Obviously, they have friends and that will continually be invited to it, but it exposes folks from all over the United States and all over the world to new audiences and vice versa. New people are now able to try beers from Japan, beers from Chile, beers from, from San Diego, if they're flying in from, the East Coast, or vice versa, people from Florida coming in. And it's a lot of passionate individuals that are all in one place. And it's very much, it doesn't feel, this is the way I put it. It doesn't feel like you're dragging your significant other to an event that's local, if that makes sense. On a Sunday or a Saturday. Well, we got nothing else to do. Let's go. Well, I don't really drink beer. This is for the beer people. This is, and it brings in, they do it really well at least from what I've seen with the city of Paso Robles. They really do involve the local community there as well. They have a big, at their actual facility the day before and the day after, they have a big block party and they allow everyone to come to that. I don't believe you had to get tickets, but it's open to everyone, and they really welcome the local community because it does bring in quite a bit of revenue for them. I just think it's really well done. I think they really prioritize the brewers and the people attending. It is hot.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God.
It's hot.
It's like 110 degrees the whole time. I'm not looking forward to that, but
I think it's interesting. One of the things, the first 10 years of my brewing career was in Michigan, and they've got a great craft beer history there. Obviously they have some brands like Bell's and Founders that are well known, but a lot of breweries that have been around for a while, and they had a great craft brewers guild there, and they would put on these beer festivals, and they would pack it out. They got multiple days, maybe 5,000 people a day. They would do it. They would have Winter Beer Festival, which was outside in the winter, like cold as hell in Michigan. But what they always did well was the brewers hospitality area was amazing. So like you would get in for breakfast, they would have an omelet station. Somebody's making omelets. There's a huge pile of bacon. There's Bloody Marys. There's mixed drinks. There's beers. There's everything. But like they took care of the brewers. And you go to some festivals, and you go in there, and there's like a few cases of like Costco water, like on a high top that wants to tip over. You know what I mean? So it is nice when you have those festivals that actually, kind of do keep that in mind and push to, help out the people that are technically working there. So absolutely.
Well, that is something to be said too about the fact that this festival, and I'm seeing it more and more in certain areas, but a lot of the people pouring are the actual brewers themselves. So I feel like it's a cool experience, not only for a brewer, and some of these breweries will send like they're maybe not cellarmen, but definitely lower level brewers to experience being in front of people who are actually drinking in real time their beer. And that is really cool to me. And having that business to customer interaction and the actual people creating, to me, is a really cool experience. But on the note of, the hospitality suite, the Hollingberry is put together. So Hollingberry and Sons, the great hop purveyors that they are, put together a RV park out back of the festival. So all the brewers stay in this makeshift RV park. It's very cool. They do such a good job. So shout out to them for putting together just this ultimate.
For sure. Yeah. That's awesome. Is that a multi-day event?
So no, it is just the Saturday. So you can go in with VIP or not, but the brewers, I believe, get in on this Friday. There's a barbecue for the brewers and people involved, the volunteers, and then the Saturday, and then there's an after party. But yeah, so, and then, multi-day, there's a breakfast after for the public on the Sunday. So you don't have to go, but as far as the actual event goes, it's just, I believe it's like 5 hours. So it's a long day.
yeah, for sure. Well, that's cool. So let's dip into a little bit about kind of your background in the industry. It seems like you've done a little bit of everything. Did you get directly into the industry after school? Kind of what was that path like?
Yeah, so I was a University of Manitoba Aggie, and we like to drink, we like to party, and
what is an Aggie?
That's the name of our agricultural student association.
Sure. Yeah. So, but is that the name of the mascot? Are you Aggies?
No, we are the Bisons.
Oh, Bisons. Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. All right. Continue. Go ahead.
We were the Aggies within the context of the Bisons.
I see.
Our school was engineering and agricultural professional school for the most part. I mean, it was a full university, but those were the big faculties, being in kind of 1 in 3 people in our province are directly in ag, and then I believe it's very focused on agriculture. So but we were sitting around, I was part of the student association for them, and we were sitting around with it, and they're like, someone needs to get into beer, and I'm like, yeah, all right. I'm the only food scientist here, let's do it. So a lot of my friends were wheat farmers and grain farmers, dairy farmers, pig farmers. So, we were joking around, but it kind of stuck. So when I got chosen to go to Purdue, I did my master's in enzymology and food science and some product development and microbiology, kind of a mix of things. I applied to go work for Diageo as one of their liquid commercialization people. So essentially making the products, from a small benchtop trial all the way to hundreds of thousands of gallons. And that was really my start to the alcohol biz. So in so many ways, it started me out into alcohol. And then I said, well, this is fun. This is a good way of me experiencing what it could be like being in the alcohol industry. But I didn't feel like I was really at the heart of it, because I'm literally just pushing buttons, mixing fluids together in a lab, getting the right pHs, getting the right ingredients together. And that's fun and that's great, but I really want to be more intimately involved. So I had applied previous to graduating from Purdue for the UC Davis program. And back then it was like 2 to 3 year wait list.
Yeah.
So I finally got in, and so I left Diageo, did that. I took a little while off because it didn't start until January, and I just didn't want to work anymore. So I traveled, as one does, to soul search and all that stuff. So, but I went into the UC Davis program, and it was awesome. And I met some of my best friends. We had so much fun. It was just like the stories that came out of that. It was like it was like a bunch of people in their late 20s, early 30s, and some in their 60s, because the GI Bill was used in a lot of cases, being on Rumspringa. It was nuts. it was nuts. So, but we learned a lot. We had a lot of fun, and a lot of those people are still in the industry today. And it really launched my career. So I went from there. Of course, I had my car full of stuff, and that I said, well, I'm only going to go where I can bring my car. So that's either up or down from Davis. So first people that reached out were outside of Seattle. I said, great, I'm moving to Seattle. And here I am. So kind of made my way through multiple different levels of production management, head brewer, before, kind of a few different personal reasons I went back to Canada and worked for that's when I started my career in sales, ingredient sales.
Okay. So a quick question for you. So I was actually just doing a podcast with Nate from Escarpment just this morning, and we were talking about formal education, and just essentially apprenticing in, getting a job and getting a job on the ground floor. If somebody wanted to know what your take is on that, having the UC Davis background and that experience, kind of what's your advice to folks as far as that question of if and when to pursue higher ed with that, what's your thought?
Yeah, I think I have a bit of a different bias now too, because I'm working as a lecturer, professor, whatever you want to call it, curriculum advisor for Washington State University's new program, which will be coming out this August. So
beautiful.
I think I have a different take on education because I'm also now participating in building education. I found it really useful because as someone who's just a home brewer, not just a home brewer, that's
sure. Yeah.
Don't come after me, please. As someone who is a home brewer and not necessarily someone who is super well versed in beer and brewing science, having come from hard spirits distillation and product development on a very large scale, I found it extremely helpful and really the only reason I was able to break into the industry. As someone who is passionate, without that degree and without that ability to understand what beer and brewing science really was about, I don't believe that I would have been able to break into this industry without having done the traditional steps of going from cellarman all the way up, and there's nothing wrong with that either. And a lot of people, especially with their education nowadays, do still start with cellarman because it is highly competitive.
Yes.
I think I started with a very, very small company who was able to help me break into, higher level positions just because the need of a brewer who actually knew what was going on, without necessarily as much experience as someone who was starting as a cellarman or who was a home brewer and passionate about working in production. So to me, it gave me a level up as far as my ability to break into the industry. I think it's really helpful for people who are home brewers who want to break into the industry as well. I think passion is there. I think it's great to be a home brewer. I think having the ability to translate that into large scale production is extremely difficult without having a background. I will not name names and I will not talk about certain consultation projects, but I have had to undo a lot of homebrewer turn production work, a lot. And it's not necessarily all the time, but I have had to deal with the fact that a lot of the concepts cannot necessarily translate one-to-one. And that's something you might be able to learn in more great detail, having done at least a couple courses, maybe a malting course. It doesn't have to be formal education, but getting an education or shadowing someone. Again, I am all for education, and I think it's really important, especially if you really want to further your career and make the best beer possible. I think that is. If you're looking to break into the industry, especially now, there are people that are willing to let you watch them, shadow them, volunteer, work as a cellarman, get that information, because that is a form of education as well. And I think that is super important to have, those apprenticeships, those internships, those shadowing opportunities, those work as a cellarman or work as if you're a taproom manager. Getting into the industry is difficult, but if you're willing to put in the work, even from an informal education standpoint, I think is really important. That's a really long way of saying, yes, I think it's important, but it doesn't really matter.
No, that's great. First of all, I think Nate asked me a question that had a 1-minute answer this morning, and I think I talked for 45 minutes. So where you're in good company if you're ever concerned that you're going to answer a question for too long. So no, that's no concern. No, that's an excellent answer. What is something? So when you left brewing, the production side, was there an unexpected thing that you ended up missing from it?
Yeah, kind of. That's a difficult
The answer can be no as well.
No,
I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying no.
Production is great, and I love working in production and going from production to sales and being on all sides of the industry. I think there's elements that I miss about each part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the way I would put it. I really enjoyed home brewing because it allowed me to control the minutia of it. I hated home brewing because my floors get sticky and I don't have a trench drain that I can just spray it off into. That is the best part about brewing in general, is just the ability to spray things down. That is,
I want my house to have trench drains.
I would
I want the kitchen to have trench drains.
If I could have a trench drain in this 500 square foot apartment I live in, I would, like, that needs to start happening. It's just like, just spray it all down. Everything stainless steel, spray it down. I'm done for the day. It's no, so that, like, to me, it was such an upgrade. And then going from production, I love being in production. But it's hard work. It's super hard work. And no one can tell me otherwise, unless you're working for an industrial brewer and you just have to press buttons. And I mean, it's not that easy. And I'm oversimplifying it. So don't come at me. But like, there's it's difference between, like, I was using a makeshift dairy container and didn't have rakes. So I was manually raking in 30 for a 30 barrel batch.
Yeah.
There's levels of manual labor, and I just didn't want to be getting up and working 10 hours and having to spray down a pump because it kept cavitating. It's like, what do you mean? Well, it's from China. Great, that's awesome. It keeps overheating, so I have to put a bucket of water on it. Why don't we get me one? There's just so many elements of, like, I don't want to put up with this anymore. And also, there are elements of, like, being a woman in this industry. It's difficult in certain circumstances, not all, and there's some incredible brewers who have absolutely, and breweries who have welcomed in a diverse set of brewers from production all the way through the tap room, and I think that's awesome. But that there is an element to that as well. So being in sales brought its own issues, and I love being in front of people and talking to people about new products and technical solutions is super fun for me. What can I help you with? What products do we have that I can help you with? To make a better product for you. So there's elements to each job, and I think there's it just depends. I think it just depends on the day. I miss using a tri-clamp a lot. I do. It was really fun. But there's elements to sales in this industry that I didn't enjoy. And I still don't. And there's large companies that I would never, even if they gave me tons of sums of money to go back, I would, there's a lot that I wouldn't do again. So
what are some of those challenges, do you think?
Oh yeah. the personalities, we'll go with that. I think that's the most political answer I can put. There's definitely a lot that goes on behind closed doors that I think a lot of people miss, and personalities are some of those. We'll say that. Outdated ideology. But I did enjoy working for the Roy Farm folks, and I'm really happy for them and their new endeavor with Crosby. I think that's going to be really cool to see how those new innovative connections between farms, like they're doing, will ultimately be the way that we're looking at hop farming right now. So
so dip into that a little bit. Tell me about your time there. And kind of what that shift was like, dealing with some things like that on the supplier side.
Hold on one sec. My cat is meowing nonstop. One moment.
You're fine. Go ahead. You're fine.
I'm just gonna mute it. Yeah. Never mind. She's fine. She's just being a brat. Like, if I could show you this little brat girl. Here she comes. God, no, she's just been in the bathroom. I keep worrying like she's going to get stuck for some reason. She's small. This is the best thing ever.
There you go.
This was my pandemic.
Just the one arm, the one leg stuck straight across.
She has been sitting. She has been screaming the entire time I've been on. I'm like, are you trapped somewhere? No, she's fine. You're just fine. You're just needy. All right, she's gonna be on my lap for the rest of this. Anyways, no. So I think going back to your question, I think there's been. I really enjoyed working for a family farm because it definitely brought me back to what hop farming ultimately was what the start of hop farming was, and why hop farms came to be, and how they operate. And honestly, harken back to when I did work in agriculture, long time ago from the farming standpoint. It's difficult, especially when you are trying to work with distributors, manufacturers, large breweries, small breweries. It can be very difficult, and having the infrastructure that's in place, needs to be maintained, is extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And a product that can only be used essentially for one thing, that's tough. That is a tough thing to do. So seeing it from the perspective, not just as a distributor, but from the farming perspective and what that goes on behind the scenes, challenging, for sure challenging, but very interesting to see what that was like and be a part of. And they're wonderful people. I really think the Roys, and especially the Crosbys, and I'm excited again. The Crosbys have been doing all sorts of innovative things for a few years now, and I'm interested to seeing what that looks like.
What is that they're pairing up on? Because I did see something about Crosby pairing with somebody and having a flowable. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
So essentially, what happened, to my knowledge, and I'm not super well versed in all, because the Roys and the Loftus have an agreement. So they've got a partnership, but it's a different kind of partnership. The Roys and the Crosbys have essentially merged sales forces. So the Crosbys are taking along a lot of the direct sales and distribution rights for, to my knowledge, if I'm remembering this correctly, and because I've read the press release. So they're essentially combining sales forces to be able to reach everyone more effectively, rather than having two separate sales forces. So the Crosbys are selling the Roys products, and kind of vice versa, but bringing on more of those relationships, which I think is great. Because not that the Crosbys are a small farm, and not that the Roys are a small farm by any means, but having the infrastructure and resources shared between the two farms, especially at a time when hop farming is extremely volatile, there are a lot of cuts, I think is actually a really good idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. The first time I had been to some hop yards in Michigan, because when I was first getting into the industry, that was right when kind of hops are going into the ground in Michigan, and they're trying to get that thing going. And then I remember we went out to Crosby. It was one of the CBCs or something that was out there, and then I jumped on a bus and went out. Yeah. I went out for Portland. Were you going to conferences the last time it was in Portland?
No, I wasn't.
When that was. Maybe it was like 7 years ago or something.
No, it was longer than that.
Was it? Could be. So I think I'm at the age where I wonder when I try to think when an album came out, and I'm like, oh, that was 5 years ago, but it was really 10 years ago. That's the age I am, where everything is twice as long ago as I think it is.
I'm going to look this up. Portland CBC.
Yeah, when was that?
Brewers, because that was.
It could be.
When was that? 9 years ago.
I wasn't 9.
9 years ago.
I was a much younger man.
20,
but
no, that was 10 years ago. Just kidding. Yeah. 2015.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah, that is. So yeah, I remember we went out there and we went out to Crosby, and they did a big thing out at the farm. And that was very cool. I remember from a brewer's perspective going out there, and you've kind of seen the things, you've seen the tools, you've seen a little bit of processing, but it's always online and whatnot. So how was it for you, having kind of that brewer's perspective, and then going and being able to get some time, like I'm assuming on the farm, near production space, things like that? What were some of the interesting things that came from that for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I worked for YCH, we would facilitate selection for about 2 to 3 weeks at a time I was somewhat familiar, but being on the farm, facilitating fresh hops, for example, and being, leading the tours, not necessarily just going on the tours. That was a new experience for me. I was there for 5 weeks. So August to October, essentially, for all of harvest during the week for the most part. And, it's long. It's only that period of time that this is an operational farm. And I think people forget that it shuts down, people go home, and that most of those very, very expensive tools, production facilities, they're not used again for another 11 months. So it's a new experience only because I was in it rather than nearby with the distributors and with companies kind of like that. They're doing great jobs, but they are not on farm.
Sure.
They're not seeing, what the stalls, the holdups are, the tough decisions. Are we picking that today? Are we not picking that today? And knowing that it's coming down to like one or two people to really determine, what is the moisture level? Is it hot today? Is it cold today? How are we going to be setting up our picking schedule to maximize the time that our employees have, that we have, and that the hops have? How do we get the best quality and manage all of these factors? So I think that's something that's a huge takeaway that, people come into Yakima or into Oregon to see, and they get to leave and with their fresh hops or with their selections done and have a great time. But we're out there.
Sure.
We're out there for the long haul, and the farmers are out there well before that trying to set everything up. So it's not just, it's a fun time, and there's a lot of excitement and frivolity around it, but we're all very tired.
Sure,
and the farmers, I'm not one of the farmers. I'm a salesperson. I'm there for 5 weeks, and I have no idea how much more exhausted they have to be because they're there for months in advance of that and months after.
Sure. So what is for somebody that has not done selection before, what are kind of the nuts and bolts of that? What does that look like?
It depends on who's facilitating it. I've seen a range of ways people put it together. Some farms like to have the sensory data, so that way they can help facilitate people who aren't doing selection and helping them pick hops later down the line, either years down or months down. Here's what we found your peers to have smelled, or what our sensory team has smelled, and here's a spider graph. But a lot of it is, here are the lots that have come off the field. They're dried, they're ready to go. Which ones do you like? We bring in usually 3 to 5 different options. They smell, they rate, they determine which ones are closest to what they're looking for either their flagship brand or just in general if they like something. And that's really the long and the short of it. It's just rubbing hops. It's just rubbing hops and saying, yes, I like it. No, I don't. And it can go much more granular than that, or it can be the simplest thing ever. We can just hear the lots that came off of these fields.
It's interesting. I was listening to, I'm going to forget the name, but I was listening to a brewer from a large regional producer, and he was saying, like, they're to the point to where they've collected so much data on them going out and doing selection for so long. He said they basically just know what we want according to, like the actual like data.
Yes.
You know what I mean? To the data from the hops. And so they just give us stuff that hits those things, and we're like, yep, that's it, basically. You know what I mean? I think that's pretty fascinating. And as somebody, we all have holes in our game as brewers. I think for me personally, I have some brewing friends that they can rub hops, break down a pellet, rub it, smell it. They can tell you what varietal it is. Like they're really, really sharp. For some reason, that's not something that I've ever been very good with. And I think honestly, I just need to actually go out and kind of like dig into the experience a little bit more, because I find more often than not, like when I was learning how to judge beer before getting into brewing, and I really wanted to work on my palate. I think more often than not, it's a question of not necessarily like skill / talent, but there's a big experience factor there too. You know what I mean? Like, it took me a while to be able to pull diacetyl from a beer, but once I got it, it's like riding a bike, right? You're like, okay, that's the thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so anyways, yeah, that is something that I would like to dive into. And one of the things that I've seen that I really like, and I don't know how universal it is, but I love when I get more information from the raw material supplier. So I know that there are some varietals, and maybe it was a YCH thing when they were slinging Crush with a K. But they were, with that one, when you look at their spider graph, they would have like the hop sensory, but then they would also have a spider graph for the hop in the beer.
Yes.
And I personally, I think the more information that we can get from our suppliers like that is the most helpful. Yes. You know what I mean? And again, it's not going to be a hard and fast rule, but in general, if you use this hop in the whirlpool, you can kind of expect X, Y, or Z. I think that's great. And I love seeing people queue up that educational component. In the work that you've done on the sales side in our industry, do you see like the educational component or the availability of educational content being like a big deal for helping to make those connections in sales?
Personally, yes, I do, but not everyone does. You have a sales force in a lot of situations that come from, I'm trying to put this, I have a lot of opinions.
You're fine. You can have opinions. We can talk about opinions.
I have a lot of opinions. You've got a sales force some of them are professional brewers, unbelievable people that do have an ability to speak to more of the technical aspects. You have people like myself who have a biochemistry background who can break down exactly what is going on in the beer from that standpoint and translate it. And that's what I love about technical sales. That's what I love doing at BSG, YCH, Roy, talking about, well, if you do this, and this is, the scenario with these two hops, here's what you're looking for from the technical standpoint. I like doing that. But you have people who also just come from a straight sales background, who have no idea what hops are. They just like beer. And that's great. I'm not going to say anything negative about that, because we all start from somewhere. There are very few of us career alcoholics, if you will.
Sure.
And so, a lot of this industry and what makes it great is the diversity of background and the people willing to learn. But there are some people that just do not have the ability to speak the language of education. Sure. And I think there's a lot of reliance on finding ways to bridge that gap. But yeah, I think it's very important. Not everyone has that same thoughts.
Sure.
Is the way I will put it. But I do have a lot of opinions on that. So
no, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So kind of looking at because you do have this range of experience, like one of the things I like to talk about on the podcast is to kind of touch on kind of look at things through a career lens a little bit too. What do you think is something that you bring to the table personally that has helped you regardless of those different roles? Because there's, even though we're talking alcohol industry, there's a lot of different roles there. What's something that you feel as if you bring to the table that has helped you be successful within those roles?
I think just an open mind about how to approach things in different ways. Again, you are, especially in larger cities, and especially back in the 2017, 2018, 2019 range, maybe even earlier than that, you have a lot of people who started breweries because it was popular and because it was a way to make money. And so you have a lot of people who didn't necessarily do it for the joy and the love and the passion. They just thought that because craft beer is such a big thing right now, they're going to make some money out of it. So you have to, a lot of the success that I've had has come from just trying to be nimble and agile within those organizations and follow the directions of those people. because it can be a polar opposite to the place that you worked last. You know, the values, the morals, the attitudes. And so a lot of what I try to tell people is this is a industry full of people who didn't necessarily do this to start, and they're coming from a completely different perspective, and from where you might be coming from, you know, you might have been an architect. That's a different industry with different sets of standards, codes, values than maybe someone who was a chef, because I've seen both in the same place and they do not work the same. And it's a lot of just, again, dealing with multiple industries coming together over one singular product. And we're starting to see, again, more people who are becoming career focused brewers or career that start out this way. But we're also not, you know, we're also seeing the same thing, you know, people who would like to be in it, but had to work an insurance job, but, you know, on the side are taking brewing courses or are working the tap room. I think a lot of what has made me successful in this is just understanding that we're all trying to make the same product, and that's all that really matters. And just deal with the personalities as they come, but not everyone is going to be agreeing with everyone. And you just have to be flexible. You just have to be flexible with what people want and in order to achieve the same goal.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting too, because you and I have made a similar choice in that we've chosen to have, this might seem like a strange way to put it, but a public facing social media presence.
Yeah.
Right. So like for me, you know, I didn't have Instagram till I was 45, you know, typical. But, you know, out of nowhere, because I start doing the online content stuff, it's like, why I need to leverage Instagram. So you have to use, I had to learn how to use it. But then also like, you have to choose who you're going to be in that space, and not that you're being something that you aren't, but you choose what you share on some level. Is this a fully personal account? Is this a brand account, right? Like, is this representing me professionally? And I think it's interesting because people take different paths with it. And I found, when I first found your Instagram, I'm like, okay, well, this is like a brand forward, like, and it's still personal. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, like it's still like on some level, the stuff that I do in the brewery when I started doing in brewery content, on some way it's an online resume, right? Yeah, I'm showing myself working, how I'm managing people, you know, all these different things, right? So I do think it's an interesting choice, and I like the way you've built out your Instagram and your brand work. Did you have experience in stuff like that beforehand, or what kind of drove that decision?
No, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. It really came from the pandemic more than anything. I was working at BSG, and something you need to know about BSG is they have thousands of products. And I was part of the Western Canadian team, meaning I was the Western Canadian team, along with my inside sales rep. And what you need to know is back in 2020, there are hundreds of little breweries and larger breweries, but on the smaller side, Canada in general has a smaller production volume in a lot of places, not everywhere. But there are hundreds of breweries scattered all across a territorial area that is 52% of the continental United States. And that was my territory. And I had everyone between home brewers, seltzeries, wineries, cideries, home brewers, I think I said that already, brewers, production brewers. Like, it was insane. So what I tried to do is, especially since you can't reach all of those people by email or phone, in order to get people to not necessarily buy products, but can get to know who I was without going to see them, was to create something that was educational and got to talk about products that we had, new products, old products, how to read a malt bill, how to do COA for your latest grain, because we brought in Dingemans. Let's talk about Dingemans. It was mainly to bridge a gap between what BSG's marketing team was able to do at that time for the worldwide market, because it's a huge company and they are talking worldwide. And what I was able to do from a territorial point of view. So it was really out of necessity that it was built. And then I just kept it going, because when I worked for YCH, it was helpful for me to continue with the dialogue that I had about new products that they were releasing. They do a lot of research from their sensory lab. So talking about those new articles that were coming out from them, and really just being able to connect with my potential clients, and people within the industry. So it was really born of that. So I've been learning, to say the least. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm chronically online. I watch enough and I consume enough content that, I should. I should know what I'm doing, but I don't. And, I've been building out my brand, and that's why I'm doing my MBA, really not to really know, because again, I'm a scientist that learned how to do sales and learned all of this through, small coursework, little like shadowing other salespeople and learning that way. But I want to know more about how do you build a brand? How do you build a business? How do you work with that element? Because I've just been doing this through YouTube tutorials or being online and seeing what the trends are and how things can be done, which is the beauty of the internet nowadays, but also something that I'm not necessarily well versed in still. I just try my best. But kind of to your point, and the way that you stated it was beautiful, in that, it is what is it? Is it personal? Is it professional? Is it a resume? Is it, how do you present yourself? And I think what's really hard about this industry in particular is exactly what I said. We're all coming together from different perspectives and points of view and personalities. And what's very difficult, in my opinion, is that it becomes a lot of our lives. Like, I talk about this a lot in other scenarios, and there's been some really beautiful pieces done by like Under the Genfluence and other bloggers about, the mental health aspects of it, because it's not just, it's not just your profession anymore. It's your hobby. It's your community. It's what you do on the weekends. It's what you do after work. It becomes your life. So it's not necessarily professional Instagram anymore. I have a personal account that I haven't used in 3 years. And people keep adding me, and I'm like, I don't even know that was still active. Don't add me. By the way, if you see that come up, full disclosure, I'm not adding you back. I'm not using it. It's privated. I'm not using it. Don't add me, and but like, that's the thing. I don't need that anymore, because for better or for worse, the industry has consumed me, and I love it. And I love my community here in Seattle. I love the community worldwide, but it's a difficult thing, because it does become your whole life. And I don't know if that's something that you have found or thought about. It's your relaxation, but it's also your greatest form of stress.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I do think that can make it one of the things that in a negative sense can kind of create that tangled web a little bit, right? Yeah, no, I think so. I think so. For me, like, so we live out in the sticks kind of on purpose, in some ways. So like when we moved to Cincinnati to help open Cartridge, Cartridge is about a half hour outside the city. So all the people that live in the city that worked at Cartridge thought that they were in the country by coming out to Cartridge, which is really just a suburb. But we actually live in the country. We're another half hour out. And part of it is I knew, like, if somebody had a question and I lived 5 minutes away from the brewery, they would hit me up.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it was something that they don't need to be hitting me up about. If there's a problem, they know to reach out, right? But they thought I was living on another planet. You know what I mean? Like, some of them had never even heard, like, all we have in this town, there's a Kroger and a post office and like a UDF. And I don't know if you're familiar with the area enough to know it's a type of gas station that also has ice cream. Apparently it'll change your life. We do have a Skyline too, but that's that's just what it is. Like
Right.
it's a very small town, and nobody comes out here. And we kind of made that choice in some ways because I've done the thing where I live 1 mile away from the brewery, and that's not where I want to be anymore. So you just kind of, I've kind of separated myself from it kind of by choice in some ways, and increasingly so I have a pretty severe gluten allergy, and so I don't drink beer at all, even if it's made with Clarex or like the gluten reducing thing. I am interested in like legitimate gluten-free beer. Not that I'm not downgrading it, but I'm just talking from an allergy standpoint. I am interested in that. I haven't been able to find much. But
have you tried Ghost Fish? Because that was
what was it called?
Ghost Fish.
I've not had Ghost Fish.
I'll reach out to Reed. He's the head brewer. I worked for them. That was one of my production management jobs.
Okay. So like they're gluten-free?
They're gluten-free.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a learning curve.
I bet. I bet. So two things. I would love to talk to him. I would love to talk to him, and I would love to try the beer, because honestly, there's a big mega store here where you can buy tons of different stuff. And they had like one gluten-free beer, and I don't know if it was old or whatever. By the time I got it, it was not something where I'm like, oh, this scratches the itch.
Let me reach out to Reed, because he's a good brewer. I mean, he has been doing this. I think he'd been working as one of the brewers at least a year or two before I came on. So that's 2017.
Oh, hell yeah.
2016. Yeah. So he's almost been doing gluten-free exclusively for 10 years. So yeah.
We got to talk. I don't know if he'd, well, at least I'd love to connect with him. I'd love to connect with him.
You know what? I don't know how socially he's online, but I'll send you over his info. How about that?
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. So I think in some ways it's made it like it makes it like it makes it a little harder to be plugged in on some things, you know what I mean? But then in this strange way, like with the YouTube channel and the stuff that I'm doing on Instagram, a lot more people know who I am, and I theoretically know people. I know usernames. A lot of usernames. So it's weird to have almost like this different online community where you have no names attached to anybody. It's just, crazy handles or whatever. So that's a little something different, but it is still interesting that even through that format, how you can connect with people.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so, whether it's something that you're sharing in a blog, sharing in a video, and I think just in general, one of the things that served me well is I don't know everything, and so I'm more than happy to tell you I don't know enough about this, and maybe I can try to find some stuff out, or I can interview somebody else. And then just being, in general, being grateful, and by and large, it turns out all right. I had some guy in my comments over on YouTube watched like a video from like 2 years ago, and he's like, I think this guy's always hammered. Does anybody else think this guy's always hammered? And I'm like, dude, I barely drink. What do you mean? Yeah. And he had like feelings about it, and I'm like, I'm sitting here, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, I'm smiling and having fun. Right. But anyways, that's a side issue. Maybe it struck a chord with me. So let me ask you this question. We might be jumping around a little bit, but let's dig in on this. So I remember like maybe 18 months, 2 years ago. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there's kind of been some like hot take reporting stuff going on in the world of hops, and I haven't actually had him on the podcast. I was considering. I've heard him. I think he's been on the sustainability podcast out of the UK. I can't remember the name. Will pop into my head in a minute. Modern Brewer Podcast. And Chris over there. I think his name is Chris. Chris is a nice guy. And he's had him on a couple times. Is Douglas McKinnon, right? Or is it McKenna? McKinnon.
McKinnon,
yeah. And this dude, so he has a Substack that he's posting on, and like blazing hot titles on these. If he's writing these titles on his own, he needs to be employed just for clickability of a title. You could just bring him in as like a clickability expert, because he has some burning hot titles to these things. And for the interesting thing to me is, I do think that it's very possible that the super majority of information that we get coming out about our harvests and everything like that are coming out from the growers. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's, anything terrible is happening there, but is clearly coming from a perspective. And so this guy starts writing these articles, and then I'm like, well, let me look up his, like, he was on, because he's putting the stuff on like LinkedIn or something. Yeah. So I pulled up his LinkedIn, and I'm like, okay, so he has like he has a background, like he's done more in the field of hops than I have. Because I was wondering, maybe it's just some dude that like got hired, like in sales and like flamed out and then was super bitter. But he's just out there roasting constantly. Lots of hot takes on that side of things. And I know you said that you're somewhat familiar with that stuff. What were your thoughts like when you first started seeing that him drop that content?
I have to be very careful about what I say here. But I
don't want to get you in trouble. On
no.
And hopefully you don't feel I'm not setting you up for something like that.
Not at all. No. And I know that it's more. I don't not believe him. I think there are definitely some truths in what he is saying. I think, I talk about Eric Sannerud. I think he's another hop blogger. There's about, 5 of us, I would say, including Stan Heraminas, and, Eric, Doug, myself. I don't think of anyone else who come from different perspectives within the industry, within the hop industry. And I can't invalidate any one of them. I think they're all they're different, but I think we're all somewhat on the same page, depending. Mm-hmm. Doug definitely likes, the flashy titles and a lot of hard hitting statements.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to say that I don't disagree with him on a lot. I think there's some interesting statements he's made that I personally cannot comment on. I would say the best, most political way I can say it. I have to be very careful about what I say about the hop industry. There are some very sensitive individuals, so I just don't. And I've tried to craft my articles and my statements and my insights around being very politically correct when it comes to those individuals. And I know there's a few of us that feel the same. I would say Eric Sannerud's a great resource as well, because he focuses almost entirely on hops. I've jumped around. Again, I'm Shan Ferments, so I do a lot on multiple spectrums. Hops being, one of the ones that I'm most passionate about, I would say. But I think, he's got a great perspective. My old employers, the Roys, have a new podcast called No Dirt, No Flowers. Another excellent podcast that specifically talks about the trials, tribulations, and the future of hops, specifically from a farmer's perspective. Definitely check it out, because it's very interesting to see what Mike, who is one of the owners, Mike Roy, and Drew, one of the, I can't remember his exact title right now. If he's president or he's CEO but he's awesome. He came from Yakima Chief Ranches, so he's had quite a bit of industry experience from that side. So those are some really good resources, I would say, as far as some more in-depth, less inflammatory statements. Sure. Again, sure. I would say I can't comment on everything that he's put out. I think he is putting out some things that really do get people talking, which I think is super, super important.
Sure.
I worry for him I do worry for him. And he's really nice. He's a really well-spoken, very highly educated, brilliant individual. I have
and so he was, when I first saw him on I'm still forgetting the last name, but Modern Brewer, when I listened to him on Modern Brewer podcast, I had read the headlines, read the articles, and then he started speaking. He's so soft-spoken.
Yes.
Like I was expecting like this big personality, right? Because there's some pretty bombastic titles that are being dropped on these Substack posts, right? But no, I mean, he seems like a soft-spoken guy, whatnot, and there's it's not like light reading. I mean, he's data heavy.
Yes.
He's data heavy. And so in my mind, at least I do think if there's anything good of it, whether you agree or not with what he's doing, I do think it's important to have conversations around things.
Agreed.
And to have different takes. But yeah, I saw that and because I mean, the hop industry has gone through its interesting ebbs and flows. I remember when I tail end of my home brewing, getting into switching over to the pro side. I mean, we went through some massive hop shortages where you couldn't find anything, let alone, I mean, really, I mean, you could find something, but I mean, you only want to be slamming so many fuggles into your American IPA, you know what I mean? So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I mean, so there's definitely been some ups and downs, and it seems like we're in a situation right now where there is a pretty robust surplus, from what I understand. But at the same time, from what you're hearing, it sounds like some people, they're pulling some hops from the ground in some areas. They're trimming back a little bit. But on some level, it seems to be a little bit of the ebb and flow of it.
There is that cyclical nature of it, for sure. There are also things that have been done that I don't believe were necessarily ethical or correct, that I will not get into, that have pushed us into this situation.
Sure.
And I have spoken briefly about my thoughts on that through some of my articles, but I will not be outright saying what they are. But it is, there are definitely things that I have witnessed myself that have pushed us into a situation like this that I don't believe would have been as exacerbated had we not really taken a step back and identified why and what we were doing. And there just is some very poor business strategies that were really the reasons why we're here today. Not final words on Doug. I completely agree. He is saying he is pushing the needle forward in that he is bringing people in with these very bombastic titles and statements, but it is creating a dialogue, which I think is really important.
Sure.
And then because otherwise, it's for a long time it was just a commodity. It was just alpha. Alpha is a commodity on the market. That's what it is. Yep. And we have transformed it from strictly what is a commodity to something completely different. And I think that's where we do need to have these open and honest discussions. And he does have an insight. So that's my last statement on Doug. But yeah, I think there are new and interesting perspectives coming out right now. Again, like I said, No Dirt, No Flowers, great listen. But I think as far as the surplus goes, there could have been a lot of things that mitigated why we're here. Sure. You're right. There is an absolutely cyclical element to it that we can't, that does not get enough blame for what happened, but there's other things that work. let me ask you this. What do you feel like the impact of, and if you don't have a take on it, it's no big deal. What do you think the impact of something like lupulin exchange is on contracts?
because contracts are an interesting thing, because there's a long period of time where I wasn't contracted up and all I could get was Cascade, Centennial, and Chinook for my IPAs, because I wasn't contracted up in the early 2000 teens, right? 2012, I'm picking up spot market. I can't get anything that's, more desirable or whatever. But now, Lupulin Exchange is pretty wild.
Yeah.
And especially for people that are not good planners. Because I will not say that I'm that guy, but I am that guy. I mean, there's been plenty of times where I can get, because one of the people that I would purchase from was out of Michigan. I knew I could order it and I would have it in 24 to 48 hours because they were so close to me. And so like that secondary market right there, what do you think the impact? Because I know I'm not the only brewer that was using Lupulin Exchange in order to scoop up hops. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that kind of role in that spot market and how that has kind of affected things?
I think it serves a need. I absolutely think it serves a need, and I think it, for better or for worse, it people use it and it works. Mm-hmm. I think that's as much as I can really say about.
Is it a pain? Is it a pain for the folks on the production side, the farm side?
It depends on who you ask. It really depends on who you ask. But what you do see a lot of is not necessarily people using it as a primary source to sell off hops. It is mainly as something that, at least from what I've seen is, oh God, yeah, we under contracted that much and they don't have any left. Let me see what's on there. Or we over contracted last year. We're getting in our new crop. Here's what I'm putting out there from last year. I don't see it as some way that someone is going out there and I'm contracting hops and now I'm going to sell them and make a secondary.
Correct.
No one's doing that. So as far as a contracting goes for the farmers, it can be difficult to navigate. And I think there's varying opinions on what benefit Lupulin Exchange has had on contracts and on the actual farmers themselves. I will say contracts are changing. There are quite a few new models of contracting coming out, which are very interesting because they are working more directly with the farmers rather than with larger companies on how to navigate those contract overages. So we are seeing a shift and a dynamic change as far as like contracting goes. What is really cool that is coming out, which I think is going to completely change everything, is not necessarily things like Lupulin Exchange or new contracting models, is actually the research coming out of Oregon State University under the Shellhammer Lab. He's my favorite professor. I know. I always am like, oh, he's like a celebrity. Every time I see him, I just get so excited. I'm like, oh my God, it's Dr. Shellhammer. I'm not even joking. I just saw him a couple weeks ago and I'm like, oh my God. And I met his wife. He's like, oh my God, you're married to Dr. Shellhammer. Yeah, no, definitely like, whoa, he's so cool. Grandfather of hops, like unbelievable lab that he has put together. Some of the most innovative research in the world ever pertaining to hops. But one of the coolest projects that he's come out with is essentially, and he's still working on it. It has not come out yet, but he's working on it right now, is like the HSI of hops. So HSI being, hop storage index, we're looking mainly at the degradation through oxidation of acids, right? That's predominantly of what we're looking at when we talk about HSI and how that affects quality. But what he's looking at is going beyond that and doing, the aroma testing and the actual quality and flavor testing. So yeah, okay, we've got a low HSI, but if it's
HSI is what?
Hop storage index. So essentially the degradation of hops, and how they store over time and how that oxidation degrades the quality. And it's a really important metric that I think a lot of people ignore. What I find fascinating is this concept of what the quality is of the hop from a flavor and aroma perspective a few years later, and having a metric that tells us what that is going to be. So let's say you are on Lupulin Exchange and you are looking for a superdelic even, from 2022. I think Did it come out in 2022 or 2023? Anyways, whatever. I can't remember what year it was launched. If he's going to have a metric that says, okay, from the oxidation quality perspective, from the HSI levels perspective, we've got a certain level of degradation, but from a aroma and flavor standpoint, it's about as good as what it is right now. Mm-hmm. So we see quality changes year over year with different hops and the varieties. Mm-hmm. And you notice that it's like, oh, the mosaic from this vintage, in so many words, isn't as good as a year ago. So I'd rather just keep using the stuff I got a year ago.
Sure.
We're going to have a metric to be able to showcase that. So we're in the surplus that we currently have would not necessarily even be an issue because, oh, well, we know that the stuff from 2021 that's in storage is actually on par right now or has a really good whatever metric he's going to come up with to essentially rival what we're picking right now or rival what was picked last year. You know, it's never going to be necessarily the best compared to what we're the freshest, but can it beat what we got last year? You know, can we use this effectively, not just for the bittering aspect of it? So I can see that changing contracting structures, supply chain, supply, storage in general. I think really quickly. I think once that comes out, and he's hoping, I believe he said 2026 or 2027, he wants to be done with the research. That's going to be fascinating.
That's interesting because I had read some stuff and, you know, people are making, I've seen some people make some claims about the storability and the, you know, the how long it can be stored and still maintain those positive elements that we had. And it brings me back to when I first started brewing. I was new. I hadn't been I was hired directly into a head brewer role. Like, is there anything more 2011 than that? Just taking somebody that had been brewing beer at home and then building, you know, a $1.5 million brewery on top of their back. And we're like, all right, it's yours, run with it. But anyways, but yeah. And so I had a buddy of mine that had a lot more experience than me. Cause I was trying to source some stuff and he's like, hey man, listen, I've been using, he goes, this is going to sound crazy. Cause I was always, you know, you're always kind of taught, well, fresh hops are going to be, you know, this crop year is going to be better than last crop year. And, he's like, listen, man, I've been sourcing they were 4 years old at the time. Yeah. And he goes, but I'm getting, he said, I got a bag. I said, my rep told me that they're killer just to try them. And I think he even gave him a bag or something. So, I mean, I was sourcing that 4-year-old hop. It was 4-year-old Summit, but for some reason that crop, when it was picked, it was very fruity. It wasn't like this big heavy dank bomb or whatever. And I mean, we rode that hop for a while, you know what I mean? And so I do think there needs to be a really important conversation about, okay, so how long are these hops still usable for? Right. For the flavor and aroma impact that we want them to have. And it sounds like that research is aimed directly at that, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And that's just it. And I know, I mean, like I said, I think it's going to be instrumental in changing how we just look in general at older hop and older crop years. So, I mean, it's fascinating, you know, and you're right. Absolutely. Like that, we might have things like, wow, yeah, this Summit, especially for what we're looking for, is perfectly acceptable instead of what happens now where people just either resell it on the market for cheap, send it to home brewers. You know, it gets sent in for extract. So essentially just made into alpha. And I'm fascinated to see how, as a hop industry, this changes everything and what that looks like for farmers moving forward too.
Sure. Well, I tell you what, there's some more stuff that we can talk about, but I want to respect your time, and we're going to roll into a few wrap up questions. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Something that I'd like to ask people is if you could go back and have a beer with a younger version of yourself, what would be the kind of career/life advice that you would give them?
Oh God, the few jobs I wouldn't have taken. Yeah. Like, do not. It might sound good. Don't do it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the big one for sure. But I mean, everything that I've done in this industry truly has been a learning experience. And I think that's the only way that I can really look at it, and that's what I would say, as much as they sucked, as much as I wish nothing like that to ever happen on my worst enemy, or, have to deal with the stuff that I've gone through, it's made me into the person I am, and really has allowed me to shift perspectives, change my attitude, change my knowledge base. I've met some really incredible people through each opportunity that I've had. So,
Sure.
yeah, everything happens. I'm one of those people. Everything happens for a reason, but
Sure.
you learn something from everything. That's just my opinion. No matter how bad or good things are, everything you learn, you grow from everything. So, for
sure. No, I think it's interesting, and there is something to be said for longevity in this industry too, and in order to be in this industry for a long time, I think in some ways it is good to have that outlook on it, right? Of course you're going to hit those speed bumps and whatnot, and not to minimize, but to call them speed bumps.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are they're also opportunities. They're also opportunities. Well, listen, is there anything exciting that you have coming up that you'd like to share with the folks listening?
I'm going to hopefully have some wrap up stuff myself about CBC, about Firestone. I've got a couple projects I want to start working on once I'm done with Washington State. I'm excited to launch this project. I'm excited for Washington State to have a brewing course. I'm really pumped about that. But I'm definitely ready to start moving on to the next project, because my counterparts can attest it can be tough to put together a curriculum for an entire certificate program. So
Absolutely.
It's tough. But I think we're nearing the end here, and I'm excited about that. But I'm ready. I've got a couple of things in the pipeline that I really am excited to get my toes wet into. I want to start doing videos. And I've got some idea for my own. I have a project. I don't want to say it out loud until I've actually got a few episodes down. It's not a podcast. It's not an interview podcast. But I've got a couple of concepts that I've been playing with. But again, I'm learning all of this by myself. I don't know what I'm doing. Yes.
It all sounds familiar.
You understand, so it takes a lot longer than someone who, is an audio engineer, can edit things properly. So,
Sure.
I'm excited about a couple, and I'm excited for the summer, it's busy. It's going to be good. There's some really cool events. We've got Human People Brewing, two folks that have been in the industry forever. They're opening their brewery cafe on June 7th. We've got Firestone Walker next week. I'm going with with Cold Stream Malts, Leslie Shore. So she's been in the industry longer than I have, for sure, but she was the old head brewer of Pike Place Brewing. Absolute boss woman, just unbelievable human being. So, I'm optimistic that the industry is maybe not thriving right now, but we're not doing too bad.
Sure.
At least from my perspective.
Absolutely. Well, and listen, people can always follow you over on Instagram on Shan Ferments. Shan, stick on the call just for another minute once we do sign off. It was really great having a chance to chat with you, and I appreciate you making some time.
Thank you so much for inviting me on, and it is great talking to you.
Awesome. Well, to all of you out there, stay tuned for next week's Industry Pro podcast. Is going to be with Gabrielle Lannis Mori from Dogma Brewing, head brewer from Dogma in Brazil. So that will be a fun talk. I know we're going to be talking I know we're going to be talking hazy IPA, West Coast IPA maybe, and some lager brewing as well. She's got a very cool setup out there. As always, make sure to show some love to my wonderful sponsors, Blickman and Brewed Fiscally. And as always, we appreciate all of your support, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.